here next Drew Klacik. He is Senior Policy Analyst at the IU Public Policy Institute, National Recognized Expert of Urban Policy. He's very excited to be here and beat me to the stage. And on what it takes to weave economic, housing, tax, and community development policies to improve quality of life in the city. Drew Klacik has contributed to all these skills and knowledge to making Indianapolis a 21st century community. And we are very fortunate to have him here today. So please welcome him again, please. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. I didn't write that, okay? I just want to start out by saying I did not write that. I always feel awkward when people actually act like I'm more important than I am. My thing today is to talk about kind of changes that we're experiencing and how they're going to affect us. And before I even get to a slide, what I want you to think about is something that's going to sound really trite, which is change is inevitable, progress isn't. So change is the stuff that happens to us that's going on out there. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but we live in the Midwest and we live in Indiana, so our natural tendency is to try to ignore that change and pretend it's still 1950. And the truth is, if you do that, you have no control over whether or not you experience progress. Progress is how we deal with change. Do we use it to make us be the place we want to be? Or do we let change determine what we're going to be? And I'll kind of show you how we're changing and then leave it up to you all to determine whether or not you just want to experience change or whether you're in collective progress. So for the most part, and this is kind of awkward, I apologize, I'll make eye contact with you, I'll make eye contact with the screen. For the most part, I'm going to talk about demographics, which no doubt is going to bore you all to death. But they're really important because demographics determine all kinds of stuff in our world. They determine what kind of stores we have in our neighborhoods. They determine how well our schools are perceived. They determine how safe our neighborhoods are. And I've already done worse than anybody. And they determine kind of how many people are in our workforce, how good our workforce is. If you believe the Richard Florida stuff, if we can attract and attain enough young demographic folks, we're going to be a very innovative and effective economic community. So, in big picture, since 2000, Indianapolis and the metro area, basically Indianapolis and the collar counties, has been growing. It's becoming more diverse racially throughout the region, but becoming increasingly more economically stratified, which kind of means we care less and less about how you look, but we can care more and more about how much money our neighbors make. The closer they make the same amount to us, the happier it appears we are. We're getting older. That's pretty obvious to most of the people in this room. And we're also getting more well-educated, which is really good for me since some of my income is directly related to the number of people in college. And we're also getting a bit richer, but you'll see not as bit richer as the rest of the nation. Much of the rest of Indiana, especially the rural areas, are losing relative to central Indiana. So to speak, if you're going to live in Indiana, we kind of live in the best place. We're kind of the modern Indiana. No offense to you all if you're from like Huntington County, but that's a less modern Indiana. My wife was from there. I used to go back and pretend Eisenhower was still president. You're laughing, but if you've ever been there, it's true. And they're losing relative to central Indiana. Then kind of Indiana and the Midwest is losing relative to the nation. So to some extent, if you're paying attention to this one slide without any real data, you're saying to yourself, gee, if change is inevitable, it appears that our change isn't very great if the measure is the United States, and that's true. If the measure is the Midwest, we're actually doing quite well. What pond we want to play in, right? We're like the star of the Midwest, but we're so-so when you compare us to the rest of the nation. I figured out how to work this. So I'm going to run through some data really, really quickly. I'm going to hope the slides do more than talking to me because I only have 15 minutes and somebody there's going to tell me when my 15 minutes are almost up at you. Okay, good. So in general, this is the metro area, and you can see that every place is experiencing growth, but for the most part, those wonderful suburban communities are doing much better in terms of percent of growth than Marion County, and when you get to kind of the quirky more rural counties, more Huntington-like Shelby County, Putnam County, and Morgan County, that's clearly not where people are flocking to in the same numbers as they are the kind of our more elite suburban counties. Marion County has only grown by 5%. Hamilton County grew between 2000 and 2010 by 15%. That makes it appear that Hamilton County is really a fast-growing place and Marion County is not growing so fast, right? But if my clicker works, when you look at the actual numbers, you see kind of the same story, but slightly differently. The truth is, Marion County is growing faster than any other county. If you just count people, Marion County is growing faster than any other county in their region other than Hamilton. So you can pick and choose how you want to play with data. I use these slides just to point that out to you because it is actually my job to pick and choose how I play with data. You can't pick and choose the clicker you have, so I apologize that I'm clicking like 5 times for every advancement. Rural counties, and this is important down the road if I actually get to the end of my 15 minutes, rural counties are a much different story when you look at this. For Hamilton County, of course, suburban. Tippecanoe, not really rural, but I wanted to throw it up there. It's the home of Purdue University. Thank you. That's my undergraduate degree, but I now work at IU. Tippecanoe is doing kind of okay, but then you start looking at our rural counties and you see that a whole bunch of them are actually losing population. So we've got the metro area and a few other counties that have wonderful assets that are gaining population, but there's big hunks of Indiana that are actually shrinking. I need you to remember that for a slide later. Amos made most of these points, but this slide is really kind of important. When you look at gross numbers of people, total increase or decrease in population, the red line is the white-only population. As an aside, it seems to me that that should be European American, the Census Bureau uses. My grandparents moved here from Europe. I think they would have thought of themselves as a European American, and I think it's kind of unfair that the way, but we get to just be Americans. So I'm going to say European American, even though the technical term is white. In Marion County, the net increase in population was 42,939, but it is the only county in the region that actually saw a decrease in the number of European Americans living in the county. Without an increase in non-European Americans, Marion County would have experienced a decrease in population. If you like diversity, Marion County is the place to be. Turns out not only is it the most diverse ethnically, but it is also the most diverse for the most part. The economics is you can make any amount of money, but unless you make a lot of money, you pretty much don't live out there in the suburban counties. This is another way to look at it. This is kind of, I think, cool, but maybe too complicated. The top slide is, the first thing is all minorities. The red line is the entire MSA, but for Marion County. The green line is Marion County. So you can kind of see that over the last 10 years, Marion County gained almost twice as many non-European Americans as the rest of the metropolitan area together. The second slide shows you that the rest of the region gained 144,000 European Americans, while Marion County lost 39,000 Americans. Those are the important points, and overall then, the rest of the region grew by 100, county grew by less than 50. We're getting older. That was a point I made. Getting older should be a big concern to us because as I'm becoming increasingly aware, the older we get, the more we focus on retirement. And when we focus on retirement, we're not in the workforce anymore, right? And when you're my age, we stop making people that are going to be in the workforce. So I'm kind of like doubly damned in the sense that I'm looking forward to not being in the workforce and I'm not producing workers anymore. In most parts of Indiana, as we get older, and as lots of our young people move away, we're going to be faced with a really big challenge, which is we're already starting to have counties where the workforce is smaller in the year 2010 than it was in the year 2000. If we want to continue to attract businesses, we got to figure out how to attract people that are going to work at those businesses, or at least keep them, right? My daughter moved to Houston, I think I said that already. She's guilty. Okay, this is my worst clicking so far. Okay, here's one of the strangest things we ever did at IU. We wrote a report. We wrote a report that said, here's the future of the economy. You need smart people. And then we wrote a report that labeled Indiana the brain drain, which is perhaps the worst marketing in the history of mankind. Companies need really smart people. We know that. We do a study that says we are the brain drain state, and then we go out and try to attract companies. This slide is meant to say we're not a brain drain state. Almost every county in the metro area has a higher share of their over 25 population with college degrees in the year 2010 than they did in the year 2000. Sometimes we're not gaining brains as fast as the rest of the nation, but we clearly aren't draining brains if you decide that brains are defined by a college degree, okay? So we are getting more educated over time in Indiana. There is no kind of net drain, so to speak. Very good. So that's kind of how we're changing right now. I think these projections are actually a really big deal. And you're going to see that this older thing becomes increasingly more challenging, and it's for the people that aren't my age that are going to have to figure this stuff out. But there's a whole lot of people my age. In fact, there's so many people my age that we get to do whatever we want from a public policy perspective. So the odds are what we're going to do is tell the next generation to make sure they take care of us, right? And there's going to be more of us for a long time than there are of you. So we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that stuff. When you look in the aggregate, this should be the disconcerting thing to you. These are the 15 slowest growing states projected between 2000 and 2040 in the United States. Almost all of them, in fact, the first 14 are either the Northeast or the Midwest, were projected to only grow faster than 6 other states in the nation. We're projected to grow by only a little over 8%. If you think that what grows an economy is demand, that should trouble you. Only 6 states in the United States are going to grow demand at a slower rate than we are between now and 2040. And most of them are places y'all don't want to move to, like West Virginia and Mississippi. The fastest growing states almost all have a coast or a mountain in them. California is going to be growing at about 50% at the same time we are going to be growing by 8%. If you're buying property in California, the odds are there's going to be plenty of demand for your supply, right? If you're growing property in Indiana and we're only growing by 8%, the odds are you're never going to see property values change the way our parents' property value changed. In the end, or almost the end, there's really 2 states of Indiana. There's the metropolitan region, which is projected to grow by 32% between 2010 and 2040, and the rest of the state, which is only going to grow by 6%. That includes places like Tippecanoe County. Why are we growing? This is the other disconcerting part. The metropolitan area is growing because people from the rest of the state of Indiana are moving here, particularly people who have college degrees. I go to small towns and I talk, and the parents always say to me, "Hey, smart guy," because somebody reads kind of that description of me. "Hey, smart guy, here's the deal. We do everything right. We work really hard. We send our kids off to college, and then they never come back. They move to Indianapolis or they leave the state." And I say to them, what else do you think they would do? Why would they come back to Huntington? There's nothing in Huntington for them to do. My daughter's opinion, there's not even anything for her to do in Indianapolis. She had to move to Houston. You're not going to move back to Huntington. So, in 2000, I have no good answer, to be honest with you, unless you all do the hard work and make sure that we remain a great enough place, or perhaps even a greater place, that we start to be more attractive to people who live in the rest of the nation. Here's the older slide. This is amazing to me. The number of people over 65 in the metropolitan area will double between 2000 and 2040. By 2040, there'll be 430,000 of us. The reason this is amazing to me is I didn't grow up here, and if there's one thing I know, it's that in January and February, once I'm retired, I'm going to do everything possible to not be in Indiana. They are the 2 grayest, dullest months in the history of mankind. But I might be here the other 10 months, in which case I'll be part of that 430,000, but there's going to be a lot more old people here. By the way, what kind of house did we drastically overproduce during the 1980s and 90s? 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2-story houses, right? I can promise you, and other old people will probably agree with me, those 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath houses are depressing. I think I talked through it. Thanks, though. Unless it's beer. No, it's too early for that. I'm sorry. Here's kind of the metropolitan area in the state, because remember, that's where we're pulling our people from. So by 2040, 1 in every 5 people that lives in Indiana will be over the age of 65. Those are the people that consume services and rarely work, right? In the metro area, we're going to be a little bit younger, only about 19% as opposed to 22% of our population is going to be over the age of 65. But if we let the change that's occurring happen to us, we're going to be a really old, gray, boring place, and that reflects back on the workforce, right? Because the people my age aren't really producing workers, nor do we really desire to work. At least I don't. So, what do y'all want to remember from this? I think the big thing is not actually up there, but the big thing is it's up to you guys and me a little bit, but I'm almost at the end of my career. It's up to us to figure out if we just want to experience change or if we want to do the hard collective effort that it takes to make sure that we can turn that change into progress. And kind of the micro level, these kind of seemingly boring, I always talk about demographics at parties to get people to leave me alone, these seemingly boring demographic notions really determine lots of important stuff. When I go to small towns in Indiana, I ask them if they like their pharmacy and they like their grocery store, and oftentimes they say yes, and then I say, then you're going to have to figure out how to deal with the influx of Hispanic population, because without them, you're not going to have a grocery store and you're not right. We're going to have to figure all that stuff out, because demographics determine what we get, where and what we get to shop for. Demographics also determine kind of demand, which determines housing prices. Then we have to think through who's going to take care of our elderly, me, especially since my daughter's bailed on me, so I expect you all to kind of pitch in and help take care of me. What kind of impact are we going to have on grade schools? More importantly to me, at least for the next 6 years, if we're losing population, who's going to be in my classroom, right? I think there's one last thing that I really want you to take out of this that I haven't mentioned, which is change, for the most part, is based on projections, which are based on previous data. Predictions are a slightly different thing. And one of the things I think we're starting to see, mostly in my daughter's generation, is kind of a change in what people really prefer. There's a whole lot of kids out there that don't want a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath house in a suburb anymore. They want to move back to the city. They value diversity. They don't want to waste energy. For me, that means they want to live in what I'll call an authentic urban neighborhood. For the most part, those are people my age who kind of say, when we were little, we could walk to town. Now that we're almost dead, we want to walk to town again before we pass away. And then you have the kind of sustainable kids who want to do the same stuff. If I'm right about that, when you combine that with the overbuilding of 4-bedroom, 2.5-bathroom houses, you're probably going to start to see a real fundamental change in economic segregation in the region. And you're going to start to see more and more people with wealth move back into kind of the core of Marion County. And as that accelerates, then we're going to start seeing, in a sense, issues associated with poverty start to emerge in some of our least well-constructed suburban subdivision communities, right? And that's going to be a really big change that I don't know how. I certainly don't see that we've built up the social infrastructure yet to deal with. So I think one last point. Yes. Only because I live in Marion County do I want you to think of this, so maybe I gave it away. If you kind of tried to think about the metropolitan area as, and I say universe here, but actually if you are into astrology, or not astrology, astronomy, sorry, you would know that I'm really talking about a solar system. So if Marion County was a solar system, not Marion County, it's Central, guys, totally screwed this up and I apologize, it's the lights. If Central Indiana was a solar system, what? You know the answer now. What would the sun be, right? The sun would be, I was hoping you'd come to this on your own. The sun would be Marion County, and if you pay attention to astronomy, you know that sun provides energy, and sun provides the gravity that holds a solar system together, right? It seems to me that we've kind of created, over a long period of time, some divisiveness between Marion County and the suburbs, and even further, some divisiveness between central Indiana and the rest of the state. And if we're going to make sure that we have progress rather than change, we're going to have to fight through some of that, because the truth is, if Indiana was a solar system, Marion County would still be the sun. And we all know that if the sun goes away, that's really, really bad for the earth. Right? Therefore, we really need to conspire as we seek to establish progress to make sure that we keep this place, Marion County, a healthy, vibrant place, because without the sun, the solar system doesn't do very well. So, did I get it done in time? Yes? Thank you.